One of the most familiar pictures on American TV screens is that of the President of the United States walking across the south lawn of the White House to board Marine One, his white-topped helicopter, for the quick trip out to Andrews Air Force Base to rendezvous with Air Force One, the flying White House. It all looks so impressive, from the Marine Guard's salute to the famous light blue plane taxiing down the runway. It's what we don't see that's even more impressive, however. Getting the president from place to place is a bit like planning the Normandy invasion. It involves hundreds of man-hours, millions of dollars, and tons of hardware, making your last plane trip look like a cakewalk by comparison. Let's say the president is coming to your town for a speech. Even before the president takes off, Secret Service agents and local law enforcement at each destination have already been at work for days or sometimes weeks or even months, interviewing and screening people who will be close to the president. They analyze primary and alternate routes through the city, and they sweep the site of the meeting or the rally for any possible security problems. If the destination is a foreign country, coordination with the host nation requires even more planning and rehearsal to ensure the president's safety. On board Air Force One, the president and his entourage travel with all possible security precautions in place. The VC-25A, which shares the airframe of a commercial Boeing 747, but little less, takes off with 250,000 pounds of thrust generated by 8 engines, which enable the plane to get airborne quickly when security concerns require it. Air Force One also contains multiple electronic and material countermeasures to ward off an aerial attack, but it doesn't have the parachutes or even the escape pods, such as those imagined in the 1997 Harrison Ford movie. In the cabin, everything is appointed with comfort and workability in mind. Check out some of these amenities. The president's cabin suite is located near the nose of the plane, and it has some couches that fold out into beds, complete with blankets monogrammed with the presidential seal. The president need not turn his cell phone off before he takes off because he doesn't need one in the first place. The plane has 80 phones on board with 238 miles of communication cable, along with the internet and even satellite links. There are workplaces and conference rooms with leather chairs, plus a cabin for the press corps. And just in case of an emergency, a medical room on board is stocked with a pharmacy, X-ray machine, and an operating table, and it's staffed with a full-time surgeon. There's no chintzy airline food here either. Air Force One has 2 galleys staffed with 5 chefs who can serve up to 100 meals per seating. The normal number of people on the plane is usually between 70 and 80 people. And you thought that upgrade you got to first class was nice. When Air Force One rolls to a stop on the tarmac at the local airport or even the airbase, there's no mistaking the famous blue paint logo, the presidential seal, and the distinctive words United States of America, that lettering on the fuselage. Although the planes have changed, the look is nearly the same as it was when Jacqueline Kennedy had that logo painted on the original Air Force One. That was a Boeing 707 in the early 1960s. For 5 decades, the image of an American president emerging from that famous plane has been a fixture in world events. You know, all this is planned down to the second. The speech is really the easy part. If it takes all that for the President of the United States just to go to make a speech, what did it look like for the King of Kings, God's chosen ruler of the whole world, to make his grand entrance at the beginning of the most important week the world has ever known? Luke and the other gospel writers give us a window into the travel arrangements that were needed when Jesus came into Jerusalem and into an environment that was anything but secure. First, there's a reason for the trip. Presidents usually go where they're invited to make a speech or even to attend a meeting. Jesus received no invitation to come to Jerusalem. There was no summit meeting. No summit meeting was scheduled with temple officials, who no doubt heard about Jesus, his teachings, and his healing. There was no town hall meeting that was set up with the Pharisees and the Sadducees on the pressing issues of the Torah and the purity practice that Jesus had controversially circumvented or even modified. No one had put together a press conference about his most recent activity in Jericho, where he healed a blind beggar and he ate with known tax collectors. Like Air Force One flying President Bush into Baghdad unannounced on Thanksgiving in that year 2003 to have dinner with the troops, Jesus shows up quite unexpectedly. But Jesus knew all along that he would need to make that trip. In Luke 18:31, Jesus tells his disciples, "See, we are going up to Jerusalem, and everything that is written about the Son of Man by the prophets will be accomplished." He goes on to predict his death and resurrection for the third time. But even his own cabinet, so to say, of disciples do not understand the plan. Then there was his mode of transport. In the first century Roman world, emperors always made their arrival in a city with a great deal of pomp and circumstance. Elite troops carried Roman standards, the equivalent of a big bold letter on a plane. The emperor himself entered the city riding on a war horse, the ancient forerunner of a jet, or even a chariot, which acted like an ancient armored limousine. Jesus, however, eschews the decorations and instead has a donkey commission as his royal mode of transport. And it isn't even a full-grown donkey, it's a colt. 4 spindly legs versus the powerful hooves of a horse, or 250,000 pounds of thrust in a Boeing jet. Jesus does have his disciples act a little like a first-century messianic secret service when they go to pick up this diminutive donkey, giving a kind of secret code word: "The Lord needs it." A young donkey with a large passenger struggling down a steep road that leads from the Mount of Olives to the eastern gate of Jerusalem may seem a little bit ridiculous to us compared to the white-topped helicopter and those big jumbo jets. But to the people gathered around to watch Jesus' arrival, the mode of transport was perhaps even more symbolic than Air Force One is to us. You see, by riding into Jerusalem on a humble donkey, Jesus was making a very specific political statement and messianic claim, echoing the prophet's imagery in Zechariah 9:9. Instead of a display of power and might with armed security and fighter escorts, this king comes in a humble way, riding on a donkey. And what about the crowd? The crowd accompanying Jesus was as humble as his conveyance. They were a ragtag collection of disciples and hangers-on, spreading their cloaks in the road, which was the ancient equivalent of rolling out, if you will, a red carpet. This wasn't an ordinary king, promoting his own glory and flaunting his symbols of power, but a fisher king, a king for fishermen, tax collectors, prostitutes, demoniacs, and even cripples. Many of these people probably wouldn't even have passed the Secret Service screening, but nonetheless, they lined the road for the approaching donkeycade, shouting a messianic campaign slogan: "Blessed is the King who comes in the name of the Lord, peace in heaven and glory in the highest heaven." Now, the religious elite certainly understood what Jesus was doing by arriving in the city this way, unannounced and unauthorized. Rather than joining the cheering supporters, they stage a protest. And eventually, they will realize that this would-be king's security detail was pretty weak, and they would make sure that Jesus left the city on their terms, wanting him to stagger and not swagger, carrying a symbol of defeat and death. Of course, we know that a week later, Jesus will make another unannounced arrival for which no one was prepared, making an empty tomb the focal point of all human history. Presidents and their planes will come and go, but because of Easter, Pascha, there is only one eternal king for whom the world waits in anticipation. Palm Sunday, my dear friends, is a great time to assess our preparation for the King's arrival, not only in our individual hearts, but also in terms of how we will spend our eternal lives. Speculating on the mode of transport for Jesus' return, be it surfing on a cloud or riding a celestial steed a la the apocalyptic imagery of the book of Revelation, is an exercise that some Christians have made into booming theological businesses. But we have to remember, though, that the King arrived first humbly, being born in a manger, and then he began his inaugural week by riding into a city on a laughable little donkey. So if our King comes to us so gently and humbly, how might we prepare for his return by following his example? Would we be prepared? If Jesus were to arrive in our congregation this Sunday, with what songs and shouts would you praise him? What would you be proud to show him or ashamed to show him? Would you recognize him for who he is? Or like the religious leaders, would you mistake him for someone else because his humility really doesn't fit that paradigm of the leader? How would you roll out the carpet for the King? We know the King of Kings is coming soon. So why not stage a rehearsal in your life this Holy Week through your preparation to receive the sacrament of Holy Communion or good deeds to others?